Okay, so in this tutorial I'm just going to cover a couple more kind of tips for producing the line drawings necessary for your projects. I just want to kind of illustrate, and I'm sure you guys understand this process already, but I just want to kind of illustrate how to develop like plans and sections, and then also how to add certain details to your drawings, things like trees and silhouette scale figures and stuff like that. So I'm going to start in with the plan. So I developed this kind of aerial plan last time, which is a look at the overall form from above. But we also need to develop a drawing that shows the geometry being cut through at 4 feet above grade, according to your assignment sheet. So I'm going to take, what I did was I developed based on these original kind of construction lines that we had from which we developed the plan, I also developed a version of that in elevation section. We also overlaid it on the elevation drawing, which I'll show you later. But I'm going to use that information to call out, figure out where the plan cut will be at 4 feet above grade, and then translate that to my plan. So this plan drawing, again, is just my layout of construction lines. I've offset them to each side to represent the strips. And then I have an elevation that shows the construction lines in 3D, kind of pulled up to illustrate the curve. So all I got to do is take my ground plane line and I'll offset it. I'm going to choose 4 feet, the height at which the plan cut should be. And I'm going to go basically one by one. I could even actually go in here. And I'm just going to hide everything except for the strip that I'm working on. Okay. And I'm going to start to draw construction lines. So our first one is pretty straightforward. I'm just looking for number 1 where the strip is hitting the ground, and number 2 where the strip is intersecting with the section cut line. So right there we have all the information we need to develop a plan cut for this strip right here. So then I would go ahead and delete that. I could draw some new lines to close the ends off, or I could have just trimmed my construction lines as well. And then it's also important, I think, to make a new layer to represent the section cut. Now, just like I did in the elevation, I offset each of these lines to show some degree of thickness for each of the strips. And I'm going to do the same thing in my plan cut. I'm just going to take one of these edges. So for example, right here on this strip, that's where it's hitting the ground, and that's where we're cutting through that strip. So we would see the plan cut on that side. I'm just going to take this edge right here, use the command offset. I'm going to offset it by 0.2, which is, I believe, what we used in the elevation. And then I'm also going to choose this option cap. And I'll just set it to flat. And so it'll automatically make a rectangle. I've also made a new layer for my section cuts with a heavier line weight than my profile lines. And I'm going to put it onto that layer. And this I might actually go ahead and put onto like a heavier line weight. I'm going to go ahead and offset all of these. And I'm going to change all of these to that line weight. So now I'm going to go one by one. I'm just going to hide these as I go so I don't get too confused. I'm just drawing construction lines. I'll do a couple. First of all, make sure I hit that intersection. The ones that are tilted like this are going to start to get a little more wonky for us. So for example, right here you can see, and I'll actually use the command show selected to unhide this offset strip that I made earlier. Now I'm going to use the command line, and I'm going to choose the option both sides. So I'm going to look for where the construction line is intersecting the center line of the strip, and then draw a line out towards the strip. I'm going to do that for all 4 lines. Just hitting that option both sides. Oops, gotta do the command first. Okay. I can delete my construction lines, take these 2 lines, and trim. Okay. And then once again, I want to make sure I get the offset. Oh, I actually did it wrong over here. So I want to make sure I show the plan cut on the right side, otherwise it'll start to get confusing as to how the geometry is really working. I might as well actually just put this as my current layer. Offset those edges. Okay. Right, there's another one down, so I'll hide that one. Okay. And then basically you would just go around one at a time, draw the lines that represent the thickness. So here again, it's getting a little bit kind of difficult to understand. I'll just select it so I can easily see what I'm doing. Okay. Show selected, unhide that strip, line both sides. Okay. Just delete that. For some reason those edges aren't connecting. I'll just redraw it. And then offset. Okay. And I should point out, actually, I made a copy of these offset lines because later on, well, and I've already drawn this actually, later on when I'm done, I actually want to be able to show those strips and kind of how they move across the space above the plan cut. We're going to use a dash line to do that. So hopefully this is kind of enough information to illustrate how you would go about making those plan and section elements. You just work from one projection to another. And kind of build them up that way. Okay. So I already have done a plan and a section over here. So we'll fast forward to that. I'm going to go over to my layouts again, make sure I'm going to be in print preview, and that way I can kind of check out whether or not my line weights are really reading properly. So once again, on both my elevation and on my section, I'm using a profile line because I want to be able to distinguish elements from each other, because especially when you have a lot of lines close together like this, and it's kind of not clear like where one thing is one element and one thing is another element. We want to make sure that we're using, oops, I just messed up the scale. We want to make sure that we're using the appropriate kind of line work to distinguish like where one strip is touching the air or where one strip is sort of sitting in front of another one, so on and so forth. Now, if you do mess up the scale of these, it's easy to fix. You just select the window, the detail window, go to properties, under detail, and change the scale back. You can also set this option to locked. That way when I'm in here, I can't actually move it around. So even when I'm trying to zoom in and out, I'm still zooming in and out of my layout. And if I want to line it up again, I could just move the whole window. Again, the boundaries of the detail views are not going to print, so we don't need to worry about them too much. And then I also wanted to point out I added these 3D construction lines from my elevation that I drew of the center lines onto this drawing as well, just to kind of give us a sense of what the strips are doing behind where we can see. So this inside part where we have these kind of tighter strips, we can't really see them past the outside strips, just to kind of show what's going on inside a little bit. And then on my next page over here, so I have the each of the plan cuts, and then the strips that are going overhead, illustrated with a dashed line. And then in my aerial plan or my above plan, I'm also showing the center line and the spiral, so the construction lines basically of how I generated this form. So the last thing I want to show you in this tutorial will be how to include a little bit more detail. So part of what you need to do will be to draw the site. I'm sure that entails something different for each of you, but just the kind of generic stuff. We go to the internet browser and open a new tab and search for free CAD blocks. Basically, any website you go to here is going to be fine. I can just search for whatever I'm looking for. I'll skip the ads. So if I go to this guy, So I'm going to try and choose, like, some of these trees obviously have a lot of detail in them, like they're drawing each one of the leaves and so on and so forth. I'm going to try and choose something that's a little bit less busy, so it's not distracting from my drawing. I'll download this. So you can see it came down as a zip file. I'm also going to look for a silhouette. I can't remember how to spell this word. Okay, there we go. People, CAD blocks. Again, I'm looking for elevations here. Okay, oops, there we go, okay. And then I'll download this one as well. All right, then I'll go back to my Rhino, and I'm gonna open up these downloads that I just did. So they'll open in whatever format, it doesn't matter how they open, but you just wanna drag them in, basically. And then when it asks me how I wanna insert it, I wanna select the option import rather than insert. Insert can cause problems depending on how the file is formatted. And then you'll see right away, I'm not really sure where they went. They're in their own position based on what the file was that I downloaded. I can just hit zoom selected, and then I'll move them back to 0, 0, 0, 0. Zoom selected. I suspect they're also like massively large, so let me scale everything down. Or before I do that, actually, let me go through. I also want to just pick out some of the trees that I'm not going to use. Obviously, in the desert in Tucson, we don't have a whole lot of pine trees. So I'm going to maybe pick out a couple of trees, maybe even just one that kind of looks like a Palo Verde or a mesquite, and I'll take. Maybe I'll take one. Okay. Zoom selected, and then I'll scale it down. Okay, so it's roughly the correct size for my elevation. Maybe make it a little bigger. Okay, now when I select this thing, you can see in the command line, it's telling me what type of object this is. It's saying I've selected a block instance. So a block instance is like a kind of like a reference or like a link or something like that. Basically what it means is that this is like a predefined object. And so when I make copies of it, so let me make a copy just to show this point. Anytime I edit one of these block instances, every other instance of that block will also be changed. So when in order to edit this thing, I just want to type in block edit. I'm going to delete the hatch because I don't want any hatch in my drawing. I'm also going to select all these lines. First of all, I might actually join as many lines as I can. That's helping a little bit. And I also want to go ahead and put them on a new layer so that I can control what line weight they're coming out as. So if I select all the lines again, I'm going to change them to the layer light. And then one last thing you'll have to be mindful of when you edit a block is oftentimes they'll come in with like weird properties. You want to open up the properties panel. And then under object properties, we're going to change the display color, line type, print color, and print width, all to by layer. So no matter what we apply to the layer that this object is now on, it'll reflect the properties, the print properties for that layer. I'm going to change all of those to by layer. Make sure it's on the layer light. That should have changed color, first of all. And now watch the copied one when I click OK to finish my block edit. This one has also been updated. And for example, if I wanted to, so I can also double click on an object to edit, block edit it. If I wanted to rebuild this line to make it a little bit smoother, I could use the command rebuild. Again, that'll just redraw my line with fewer control points or however many I define in here. I can click preview to kind of see what it'll be. So I want to maybe simplify it just a little bit. I kind of messed it up there. I can delete a couple control points. Okay, so once again, when I click OK, you can see that the other block instance has also been updated. And that's super useful for like things in your file that are going to be duplicated a whole lot. And so you want to be able to edit them all at once rather than having to go to each one after you've already laid out your drawings and so on. Last thing I want to point out is you should be sure to, if you, for example, want to show a tree, so I can also like scale these, I should point out. I want them to look a little bit more random than just like the same block over and over again. I can scale them uniformly, and once again, anything I do where I edit the block will be reflected in the every other block, including, you know, however I've like scaled it or transformed it. But I should point out, if you scale 1D a block instance, you can no longer edit it. It'll tell you you can't edit it. So just be mindful of scale 1D'ing things. All right. And then the last thing I want to point out is if you do have like an object behind something else, let's say like in your section, for example, I'm just going to do a little bit, so it's, I don't have a ton of trimming to do here, but and I might actually, so what I would need to do is actually explode this block. I need this block to not be associated to the other ones anymore in order to trim out the little edges in between where we wouldn't see it because the strips are blocking it. So if I take this block instance and just use the command explode, you can see up at the top it said exploded an instance into 7 objects, and now they're just curves in my file. They're not like stored within this block instance thing. And then I could go through here and just like trim the parts of the line that I wouldn't be seeing because they'd be blocked in my elevation. Just like that. And then you can see it looks like it's behind in my elevation. And I'll do the same with my, I wonder if this got downloaded. Here we go. So I'll open up this zip file with the people, with the silhouette. Just drag that in, hit import, click OK, OK. Again, zoom selected. Oh, that's kind of weird. And maybe I'll just take this guy and his dog. Oops. Move it to 0, 0. Scale them down. Okay. And for this, I'm actually going to try and use a proper scale, like, you know, so that I'm actually representing the genuine scale of this space. So one thing I could do to get it to a precise scale would be to use the command bounding box, which is exactly as it sounds. It's going to make a box around whatever I have selected at the extents. And so now I could select both of those objects and just hit scale, snap to the ends, and then enter like 6 feet or something like that. And go ahead and put that in my section as well. Okay, and then again with this object, it came in as a block instance. I would go ahead and change everything to, maybe change it to that layer. Again, make sure I change all the display colors to by layer, or I'm sorry, the display properties and print properties to by layer. Click OK. And then when we go to our layout, we should have a nice silhouette there. And if you are having trouble getting this thing to, for example, show up in front of a certain line, just select the object and type in bring to front, or select another object and type in bring to back. Huh. I wonder why that doesn't work. Maybe send these lines to back. See if that worked for us. There we go. I guess you have to send the line. That's kind of weird. But anyway, that's how you get things to kind of show up in a different order when you have like solids, like a hatched scale figure or something like that. Okay, and the last thing that I want to show you really quick is just how and where to pull off contour lines from Pima County GIS. So you may or may not have already done this for your site plans. So this is the site plan that was provided by Elena on D2L. And I'm just going to show you how to use the Pima County GIS site to download contour lines. So if and you have to make sure you're using the right browser, it'll warn you if you're not. But if you go to pima. What is it? gis.pima.gov. So gis.pima.gov with no E on the end. You may find, so in here, let's see. What? Maps? GIS maps? Pima County map guide maps. There we go, and then click on the main map guide map. You can also just go to this URL right here, gis.pima.gov/maps/map guide. Click on that guy. It'll ask you if you read the disclaimer, hit yes. And now there's also an issue of you have to add this website to like a secure exclusion. So you're going to want to go to this address right here for instructions on how to be able to access this website. gis.pima.gov/new IE. And then it'll take you to a set of instructions. It'll tell you how to open it in Internet Explorer, how to add the website to a list of exclusions so that it'll open properly and so on. Okay, and then once you're in Map Guide, so here we are. This is all of Pima County, and we can zoom in somewhat arduously on Tucson and kind of get into where we want to see more information. And I should also point out that like the layers will change and repopulate with each new level of zoom. So go right around here. Sometimes, oh wait, where are we? Oh, here. I think your sites are mostly right up around here. I'm just scrolling in. You can also use this little hand guy, pan. That doesn't totally crush my computer. There we go. And I can keep zooming in. So I have one open where I'm already zoomed into this site number 2 and 3. And then once I've reached the right level of zoom, you'll see in the layers panel a new set of layers will appear under topography pretty near the top. Right here, PAG, orthophotos, and we're going to go for the all 2-foot topography with labels, which is helpful because otherwise we won't know whether a topography line is higher or lower than the one next to it. Okay, and then once you've zoomed into the area that you want to get the data for, what you want to do is print this to a PDF. So if I just right-click on the screen here and go to Print Current View, I'm going to choose the option Adobe PDF, click OK, then I can save it as like my topo lines. When I do that, I just want to point out, and this is the option by default, but when I go to print, oops, wrong button. I want to make sure that this option, rasterize print job, is not checked. Because, and you can see it opened automatically in my PDF viewer, I'm also going to be able to drag this guy in. And I want to be aware of, let's see, where did I put this? So wherever you save that file, there's a PDF. That's my PDF. I'm just going to drag that right into Rhino. And then I'll place it somewhere. And this time I'm going to also hit import. And then zoom selected. Okay. I could delete the hatch. But because we chose do not rasterize, or we didn't choose rasterize, all the lines should come in as like editable polylines. And then all you have to do is go ahead and line those up with your site. We could bring this, oh god, where's the site? Oh, you could type select all, zoom, selected. It's over there, okay. The one problem we're having here is that my topography is much smaller than my site, because my site drawing is at full scale. Another thing I could do in here, at the bottom it gives me some indication of like the area that I'm looking at. I can use these numbers in the bottom right to scale my image. So I'll take this one, 1434. Scale the whole thing. Click on the bottom corner, bottom right, top right, 1434, press enter. Okay. Now it should be appropriately scaled. If it's not, you can just kind of line it up to the existing information you have for the location of your site. So we have like some of the parcels and like the tree outlines and stuff, so I can just roughly line it up there. Now I am going to move this out of the way. So one thing that this won't do is put everything on a separate layer. So if I select my layer, basically just puts everything on the same layer as my current was current when I opened this file, or when I imported this file. So in order to delete all the parcels so I don't have like duplicate information to what's down here, I could just use the command select color and then click on an object with that color, press enter. I'm also going to deselect anything that's in my existing site plan, and then I'll just delete all that stuff. And actually, before I do that, I'm just going to save 1 or 2 lines so I can kind of line it up still. Okay, then I'll select everything, move it back down, like so. Delete the duplicate lines. Okay, and there you have contour lines. So you can use that information to develop information about your own contours. You can also, in some cases, depending on how these contours are set up. For example, I know that I have 2 feet in between each one of these 2 contour lines because these ones are nearby, or like, when you have contour lines that kind of start and end in similar places. You can get like a kind of average curve between them. So I'll start with these ones just to show you what I mean. I'll take these 2 and type in the command tween curve. First of all, I'll set the number to 1. Interesting. So it might not work super well. Okay. That might not work for all the lines you do. You may have to, especially where there's like a major difference in lengths of line. So I could also go in here and just explode this and just do it for a shorter segment, like these 2. Oops. Now when I do tween curve, wasn't great. All right, well, just don't do that then. You'll just have to redraw them yourself. But it may still work on curves that have a little bit less information. So it's kind of working for us there because those lines are fairly well matched. But anyway, just so you're aware of that tool. Generating additional topography lines. But obviously the best way to kind of do it will really be to just draw it in section and then use use construction lines to rebuild it as a set of contours. Okay, so that will conclude this tutorial. So I'm going to sign off.